The Carnaby Curse, a 1970s London mystery story. The smog hung thick over London, a greasy shroud clinging to the grimy buildings of Carnaby Street. Detective Inspector Alistair Finch, his trench coat collar pulled high, surveyed the scene outside Bellweather's bazaar. Christmas lights, already looking tired and forlorn, cast a sickly glow on the assembled uniforms. "Locked tight, sir," Sergeant Miller, his young face flushed with excitement, reported. No sign of forced entry, like she just vanished into thin air. Finch grunted, pushing past the gawkers. Bellweather's bazaar was a sensory assault. Velvet drapes, tarot cards, and mannequins draped in vintage gowns created a suffocating atmosphere. The air was thick with the cloying scent of incense, and something else, something metallic. Cassandra Bellweather lay sprawled amidst a pile of crushed velvet cushions, her eyes wide and vacant. Her elaborate makeup was smeared, and a single, crimson stain blossomed on her chest. Embedded deep within the wound was an ancient Egyptian scarab beetle, its polished surface gleaming under the dim light. "Bloody hell," Finch muttered, his skepticism already battling with the unsettling scene. "What in God's name?" Miller, ever eager, offered. "An Egyptian curse, sir? Professor Eldridge at the museum says." Finch cut him off with a glare. "Curses are for tourists, Miller. This is murder." The locked room was a problem. The windows were sealed, the door bolted from the inside. Robbery was ruled out, the till was untouched, and Cassandra's expensive jewelry remained. Finch interviewed Esme Davies, a waifish young designer who'd worked at the bazaar. She spoke of whispers in the dark, objects moving on their own, and a growing sense of dread in the days leading up to Cassandra's death. "She was dabbling in things she shouldn't have, Inspector," Esme whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "The scarab, it was cursed. I told her to get rid of it." Finch, despite himself, felt a prickle of unease. He visited Professor Eldridge, a wizened old man who regaled him with tales of ancient pharaohs and vengeful spirits. Eldridge confirmed the scarab's authenticity and its reputation for bringing misfortune. "These objects are not mere trinkets, Inspector," Eldridge warned. "They carry echoes of the past, energies that can be unleashed." Finch dismissed it as academic drivel. He preferred tangible evidence. He turned his attention to Vivian Thorne, Cassandra's rival. Vivian's boutique, Tomorrow's Wardrobe, was a stark contrast to Bellweather's bazaar, all chrome and sharp angles. Cassandra was a relic, Vivian sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "Clinging to the past while I'm building the future." We had disagreements. Vivian had an alibi, a fashion show, but Finch found it flimsy. Then there was Julian Blackwood, the charismatic leader of the Order of Thoth, a secret society that Cassandra had been involved with. Blackwood claimed to have warned Cassandra about the scarab, painting himself as a concerned friend. But Finch sensed a carefully constructed facade. Days turned into weeks. The pressure mounted. The newspapers were having a field day with the Carnaby Curse angle. Finch, fueled by endless cups of tea and nicotine, refused to give in to the sensationalism. He revisited the bazaar, meticulously examining every detail. He noticed something he'd missed before, a faint hum emanating from behind a velvet curtain. He pulled it back to reveal a cluttered storage room. Amidst the dusty boxes and forgotten mannequins, he found it, a complex array of wires, speakers, and a primitive light projector. Miller, finally understanding, gasped. "Sound effects, sir. Light shows." She was faking the supernatural occurrences. Finch felt a surge of adrenaline. He brought Vivian Thorne back in for questioning. Confronted with the evidence, she confessed. She'd used the technology to create an atmosphere of fear and paranoia, hoping to drive Cassandra out of business. But she swore she hadn't killed her. It was just a prank gone wrong. She cried, "I never meant for anyone to get hurt." Finch didn't believe her, but he knew she wasn't the killer. The scarab was too theatrical, too deliberate. It was a distraction, a red herring. He thought back to Blackwood, his smooth words and carefully crafted persona. He remembered Blackwood mentioning that the Order of Thoth had been struggling financially. He revisited Cassandra's financial records. He found a large, undocumented transfer of funds from Cassandra to the Order of Thoth just days before her death. He brought Blackwood in. Under Finch's relentless questioning, Blackwood cracked. Cassandra had discovered that the Order of Thoth was a sham, a money-making scheme preying on vulnerable people. She threatened to expose him. He killed her, using the scarab to make it look like a curse. He'd counted on the supernatural angle to obscure the truth. It was for the good of the Order. Blackwood sobbed, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. She was going to ruin everything. As they led Blackwood away, Finch looked back at Bellweather's bazaar. The smog still hung heavy in the air, but the Christmas lights seemed a little brighter now. He knew that the supernatural was just a mask for greed, ambition, and the dark underbelly of human nature. He lit a cigarette, the acrid smoke a familiar comfort. Some things, he thought, were more terrifying than ghosts. The city, even in its darkest corners, was always, stubbornly, human. The December smog hung thick and greasy over Carnaby Street, clinging to the garish shop fronts like a shroud. Detective Inspector Alistair Finch, his trench coat smelling faintly of stale tobacco and disappointment, surveyed the scene. Bellweather's bazaar, a riot of velvet, incense, and questionable artifacts, was now a crime scene. Inside, Cassandra Bellweather, purveyor of all things mystical and modish, lay dead. "Locked room, sir," Sergeant Miller said, his young face pale in the flashing blue light. No sign of forced entry. Windows bolted from the inside. Miller, bless his naive heart, was practically vibrating with morbid fascination. "And the weapon?" He trailed off, gesturing towards the ornate scarab beetle protruding from Cassandra's chest. Finch grunted. "A bloody beetle? Looks like something out of a Hammer horror film." He knelt, ignoring the prickle of unease that ran down his spine. He didn't believe in curses, spirits, or any of that rubbish. People killed people, usually for money or sex, or a potent cocktail of both. The shop was a claustrophobic mess of tarot cards, crystal balls, and moth-eaten vintage gowns. The air hung heavy with patchouli and the faint, metallic tang of blood. Finch ran a gloved hand along the dusty shelves. "Robbery gone wrong, you think?" Miller shook his head. "Nothing's missing, sir. Cash register's full. Jewelry's still on her." Finch sighed. This was going to be a long one. His investigation led him through the labyrinthine alleys of London's occult underbelly. First, Vivian Thorne, Cassandra's rival, whose futuristic boutique stood in stark contrast to Bellweather's bazaar. Vivian, all sharp angles and icy disdain, admitted to a feud but denied any involvement. Cassandra was a charlatan. "Inspector," she sneered. "But I wouldn't waste a perfectly good scarab on her." Then there was Julian Blackwood, the charismatic leader of the Order of Thoth, a secret society that met in a damp basement in Soho. Blackwood, with his flowing robes and hypnotic gaze, claimed to have warned Cassandra about the scarab's curse. She dabbled in things she didn't understand. "Inspector, ancient forces are not to be trifled with." Finch felt a headache brewing. Esme Davies, Cassandra's young protege, was a nervous, bird-like girl who claimed to have witnessed strange occurrences in the shop. "Things moving on their own, Inspector," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Whispers in the dark. "It was cursed, I tell you." Finch, despite his skepticism, found himself drawn into the web of superstition and paranoia. He consulted Professor Eldridge, a wizened Egyptologist who regaled him with tales of ancient curses and vengeful pharaohs. Eldridge, however, also mentioned something that piqued Finch's interest. The scarab was not just an artifact. It was a complex piece of craftsmanship, possibly concealing a mechanism. Back at Bellweather's bazaar, Finch examined the scarab again, this time with a magnifying glass. He noticed a faint seam, almost invisible to the naked eye. With a delicate twist, the scarab split open, revealing a tiny compartment containing a sliver of metal and a miniature battery. Suddenly it clicked. Vivian Thorne. Her futuristic designs weren't just fashion. They were a cover for her technological tinkering. Finch remembered Esme's description of the strange occurrences. Objects moving, whispers in the dark. It wasn't a curse. It was sound and light manipulation, cleverly disguised as the supernatural. Vivian had created an atmosphere of fear and paranoia to drive Cassandra out of business. But Vivian hadn't killed Cassandra. That was Julian Blackwood. He had used Vivian's manufactured chaos to his advantage. He knew Cassandra was about to expose the Order of Thoth as a fraudulent enterprise, preying on the gullible and desperate. He had acquired the scarab from her shop and used it to silence her, knowing that the curse would deflect suspicion. Finch found Blackwood at the Order's basement headquarters, surrounded by his rogue followers. He confronted him with the evidence, the scarab's mechanism, the motive, the manipulation. Blackwood, his carefully constructed facade crumbling, confessed. He had chosen the scarab not for its magical properties, but for its theatrical impact. It was a red herring designed to obscure the truth. As the police led Blackwood away, Finch stood in the doorway of Bellweather's bazaar, the smog swirling around him. The shop, once a haven for the mystical, now seemed strangely ordinary. He didn't believe in curses, but he believed in the darkness that lurked in the human heart. And sometimes, he thought, that was more terrifying than any ghost. He lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the gloom. Some mysteries, he knew, were never truly solved. They just faded into the London fog, leaving behind a lingering chill.